He was the billionaire no one dared to approach, until a poor girl spoke the one language he thought the world had forgotten. Watson Blake, a billionaire known across Europe for his ruthless business acumen, walked into one of the most luxurious restaurants in the city that evening. Dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, his aura carried an air of superiority and unspoken authority. People around the room whispered as soon as they recognized him. For many, seeing Watson was like witnessing a living legend, powerful, untouchable, and intimidating. Yet tonight, something seemed different. His eyes carried not just pride, but also a hidden layer of loneliness. The maitre d' rushed to guide him to a corner table. As Watson sat down, he sighed, opening a leather-bound notebook filled with scribbles, in French. He often preferred to think and speak in French, a habit developed during his education at an elite Parisian academy. But outside France, especially, here in this city, people rarely understood him when he spoke in his chosen language. When the young waitress walked up to his table, Watson didn't look at her right away. He simply muttered under his breath, in crisp, flawless French, "Encore une nuit vide. Personne ne comprend jamais." Another empty night. No one ever understands. The waitress paused. Her name tag read Anjli. She was young, dressed neatly in a white shirt and dark vest, but her eyes carried exhaustion that no uniform could hide. She tilted her head slightly, unsure if she heard him correctly. She asked politely in English, "Excuse me, sir, may I take your order?" Watson finally looked up, frustration flickering in his eyes. He replied in French again, louder this time. "Pourquoi personne ici ne peut me répondre? Même commander un repas est une lutte. Why can't anyone here answer me? Even ordering a meal is a struggle." Anjli froze. Her heart raced as the words rolled through her mind. Unlike others in the restaurant, she understood every syllable perfectly. For years, she had secretly studied French through borrowed books and late-night online lessons, dreaming of one day traveling abroad. Nobody knew about this hidden skill. To them, she was just a poor girl working endless shifts to support her ailing mother and younger brother. Gathering courage, she whispered back in flawless French, "Je peux comprendre. Et je peux répondre, monsieur." "I can understand. And I can answer, sir." Watson's eyes widened. His mouth parted in shock, the glass of wine in front of him trembling in his grip. For the first time in years, someone in this city had replied to him in his own language. The restaurant seemed to go silent, as though the chandeliers themselves leaned closer to witness the moment. He leaned forward, disbelief still etched on his face. You speak French?" Anjli's lips curved into a small, nervous smile. "Oui, monsieur. Couramment." "Yes, sir. Fluently." For Watson, it was as if a hidden door had opened. For Anjli, it was the first time her secret gift had ever mattered. Neither of them realized that this single exchange would unravel a story neither wealth nor poverty could have predicted. Watson Blake could not take his eyes off Anjli. The way she had responded, in perfect pronunciation, smooth tone, and confidence, was something he hadn't heard outside Paris in years. For a man who was used to being misunderstood, ignored, or admired only for his wealth, this moment felt like a collision of two worlds. He leaned back in his chair, adjusting his cufflinks as if trying to regain his composure. But his voice betrayed his curiosity. "Comment avez-vous appris?" "How did you learn?" Anjli hesitated. She hadn't planned to reveal her secret to anyone, especially not to a billionaire dining in a place where she herself could never afford to sit as a guest. But something about his expression, equal parts loneliness and wonder, made her feel safe enough to answer. She placed the menu gently on the table, whispering back in French, "Je l'ai appris seul. Des livres d'occasion, des vidéos en ligne, c'était mon rêve. I learned on my own, second-hand books, online videos. It was my dream." Watson tilted his head, as if he didn't quite believe her. A billionaire's life was filled with people who claimed skills they didn't have, who exaggerated their abilities for favors or recognition. But this girl? Her words were too precise, too natural. She wasn't faking it. Your dream? He repeated in English now, testing her shift between languages. Yes, Anjli replied, meeting his gaze for the first time. Ever since I was a child, I wanted to see Paris, to walk along the Seine, to hear the music on the streets and not just through a computer screen. There was a pause. The restaurant around them continued buzzing, glasses clinking, silverware, scraping. But at their table it felt like a world apart. Watson's voice softened, almost unconsciously. And why didn't you? Anjli's smile faded. Because dreams cost money, Mr. Blake, and money is something I've never had. The answer hit him harder than expected. Here was a young woman, working tirelessly, serving people like him, every day. Yet she spoke a language he adored better than many of his so-called business partners. And she was stuck here, her dream locked away behind invisible walls of poverty. Watson's curiosity deepened. For years, he had dined in luxury. Restaurants across the globe, and waiters were always invisible to him, mere background. But Anjli was different. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was extraordinary. He tested her further, switching back to French and quoting a line from Baudelaire, a poet only true lovers of French literature would know. Là, tout n'est qu'ordre, et beauté, luxe, calme, et volupté. There, all is order and beauty, luxury, calm and pleasure. Without missing a beat, Anjli completed the verse. Vois sur ces canaux dormir ces vaisseaux, dont l'humeur est vagabonde. See on these canals, sleeping these ships, whose mood is adventurous. Watson blinked, stunned. He had met CEOs, investors, royalty, but none of them had answered him like this. His heart raced, not out of romance yet, but out of awe. You, he whispered in English now, are full of surprises. Anjli felt a strange warmth rise in her chest. For years she had been treated like just another server, invisible to the rich who dined here. But now, a billionaire was looking at her not with arrogance, but with respect. But respect from Watson Blake was dangerous. His world was glittering but brutal. And she was just Anjli, the poor girl who studied languages at night while washing dishes during the day. Still, the conversation stretched longer than it should have. Guests turned their heads, wondering why the billionaire was conversing so deeply with a waitress. The manager glanced nervously from the corner, worried something was wrong. Finally, Watson asked, his voice quieter this time. Anjli, if you were given the chance to go to Paris, just once, would you take it? Her breath caught. The question sounded impossible, almost like a cruel tease. Yet his eyes held sincerity. She hesitated, her hands tightening around her notepad. I would, but that's not a chance I'll ever get. Watson didn't reply immediately. He simply studied her, as though calculating not numbers, but possibilities. A man who built empires was now considering an entirely different kind of investment, one in a girl whose only currency was passion and hidden brilliance. Before Anjli could excuse herself to serve another table, Watson leaned forward and said, in French, Alors peut-être, Anjli, il est temps que quelqu'un croie en vos rêves. Then perhaps, Anjli, it's time someone believed in your dreams. Her heart skipped a beat. For the first time in years, someone had said the words she had longed to hear. She didn't know it yet, but this dinner, this single night, was about to change everything. The next evening, Watson Blake returned to the same restaurant. For a man who rarely visited any place twice, this was unusual. Billionaires didn't repeat venues. They chased exclusivity. But here he was, waiting at the very same table. When Anjli arrived for her shift, she almost dropped her tray at the sight of him. His presence was intimidating enough the first time, but now his persistence raised questions. Why would a billionaire return just to sit in her section again? As she approached his table, Watson greeted her, not in English, not even in casual French, but in the polished, almost aristocratic tone of an old Parisian nobleman. Bonsoir, mademoiselle. J'espérais que ce serait vous qui m'accueilleriez ce soir. Good evening, miss. I hoped it would be you serving me tonight. Anjli's pulse quickened. She should have smiled politely, taken his order, and moved on. But something in his words pulled her deeper into his orbit. Bonsoir. Monsieur, she replied softly. It seems you enjoy surprises. Watson chuckled, a sound far warmer than the cold billionaire persona the world knew. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. Do you know why I always speak French, Anjli? She shook her head. Because it is the only language that doesn't remind me of business. Every contract, every negotiation, English, German, Mandarin, they are tools of power. But French is the language of my childhood, my mother, and my only peace. For a moment, the mask slipped. Behind the polished suit sat a man burdened with loneliness, tied to wealth but detached from warmth. Anjli's heart softened, though she reminded herself to keep her distance. This was Watson Blake. Men like him did not belong in her world. Still, curiosity got the better of her. And your mother? Where is she now? Watson's expression tightened. He looked away, his jaw clenching. Gone. Too soon. She was the only person who spoke to me in French every day. When she passed, I kept the language alive so I wouldn't lose her completely. The silence between them grew heavy. Anjli wanted to comfort him, but she held back, remembering her role. She was a waitress, nothing more. Yet Watson's next words shattered that invisible wall. You remind me of her, Anjli. Not because of how you look, but because of the way you speak. With heart, not just knowledge. Most people learn French to impress. You speak it to feel. Her throat tightened. Nobody had ever seen her like this, not even her family, who thought her late-night studies were a waste of time. Tears threatened, but she blinked them away. I speak it because it was my escape, she whispered. Every time I studied French, I felt like I was somewhere else. Far from bills, far from worry. It gave me hope. Their eyes locked and, in that moment, two very different lives touched through the same fragile thread. Language. But just as the air grew warmer between them, a sharp voice cut through. Anjli! It was her manager storming over, his face red with irritation. What are you doing standing here chatting? Mr. Blake should not be kept waiting. Get his order immediately. Watson's eyes narrowed at the man's tone. She is taking my order, he said firmly, switching to English. In fact, she is the only reason I returned to this restaurant. If you have a problem with her, you have a problem with me. The manager's confidence evaporated. He stuttered an apology and scurried away. Anjli, however, was shaken. Standing up to her manager could cost her job, but Watson had done it so effortlessly, as if protecting her was the most natural thing in the world. Why would you say that? She asked, once they were alone again. Watson gave a small smile. Because you deserve respect, Anjli. And because I don't like bullies. Her chest tightened with conflicting emotions, gratitude, fear, and an unfamiliar warmth. But reality crashed back. Respect won't pay my rent. If I lose this job, you won't lose it, Watson interrupted, his voice calm but commanding. Not while I'm here. The certainty in his words startled her. This was a man who was used to controlling outcomes, bending the world to his will. But why her? Later that night, as the restaurant emptied, Watson lingered at the table. He beckoned Anjli closer before leaving. His eyes glimmered with something between challenge and invitation. In 2 weeks, he said softly, I have a business trip to Paris. I want you to come with me. Not as my employee, not as anything improper, but as my guide. Someone who can show me the city not through wealth, but through passion. Anjli's breath caught. The offer was dangerous, impossible, insane, yet the longing in her heart roared louder than her fears. Her lips trembled. I can't. I have my family, my responsibilities. Watson leaned in closer, his voice almost a whisper. Think about it. Sometimes the right chance comes only once in life. Don't let fear bury it. With that, he stood, placed an envelope under the flower vase, and walked away. When Anjli opened it, she found not money, but 2 plane tickets to Paris. Her name was on one of them. Her hands shook. For the first time, the dream she had buried under poverty and exhaustion was right in front of her. But was it salvation, or the beginning of a storm she wasn't ready to face? 2 weeks later, the chilly Parisian wind swept through the streets of Montmartre as Anjli stood at the edge of the Sacré-Cœur steps, gazing down at the glittering city. For years she had only seen Paris through the pages of torn books and low-quality internet videos. Now she was here, her heart pounding with disbelief. Watson stood beside her, his sharp blue suit softened by a scarf that fluttered in the wind. But unlike the billionaire the world knew, here he looked almost human. Eyes wide with nostalgia, lips curved with a faint smile. You see, Anjli, he said in French, this is where I used to walk with my mother. She always told me, Paris is not about the riches you carry. It's about the soul you find here. Anjli swallowed hard, overwhelmed by both the beauty of the city and the weight of his words. And have you found your soul again, Watson? She asked softly. Looked at her, really looked at her, and for a fleeting moment she feared his answer. But instead of words, he smiled, a smile that carried years of buried grief, now beginning to heal. The days that followed unfolded like a dream. Watson took her not to luxury boutiques or 5-star banquets, but to hidden cafes, street musicians along the Seine, the smell of fresh crepes at dawn. He let Anjli guide him, for though he had known Paris all his life, she saw it through eyes of wonder, untainted, pure, alive. Every corner they turned seemed to stitch them closer together. He recited French poetry. She sang along to street performers. He spoke of his empire's loneliness. She confessed her family's struggles. 2 opposite worlds, yet the same thread of longing ran through them both. But as the dream deepened, so did the shadow behind it. One evening, at a quiet restaurant in Saint-Germain, Watson revealed the truth he had avoided until now. His voice was low, his gaze distant. Anjli, I didn't bring you here just to see Paris. I brought you because I need someone I can trust. She frowned. Trust? With what? Watson exhaled slowly, his jaw tight. My empire is in danger. The board wants me out. They believe I've grown reckless, distracted. They are preparing to strip me of everything my family built. Anjli froze, her fork trembling in her hand. But why me? I'm just a waitress. His eyes softened. No. You are the only one who sees me as a man, not a billionaire. The only one who speaks to my heart in a language I thought I'd lost. I need that now, more than I need power. Her chest tightened. The confession was too raw, too heavy. She wanted to believe him, yet fear gnawed at her. Could she really step into a life of scandals, betrayals, and corporate wars? That night, as Watson walked her along the Seine, she asked the question she had feared most. What happens when we go back? You to your empire and me to the restaurant. Watson stopped. The lamps reflected off the river as he turned to her. That depends on you, Anjli. Do you want to go back? Or do you want to start over? With me? Her heart pounded in her chest. The offer was madness. But when she looked into his eyes, she didn't see a billionaire. She saw a lonely man who had found his anchor in her voice, in her presence. Yet just as she opened her mouth to answer, her phone buzzed. A message from her younger brother. अम्मा को हॉस्पिटल ले गए हैं, बहुत सीरियस है, जल्दी वापस आओ. Anjli's world collapsed. Her mother, the very reason she had worked endless shifts, was fighting for her life. Tears welled up as she showed Watson the message. Without hesitation, Watson cupped her hands. We leave tonight. Family first. Hours later, they were on a flight back, Paris fading beneath the clouds. For Anjli, it felt like a cruel twist, her dream city slipping through her fingers just as it became real. But Watson never let go of her hand. Back home, in the dim hospital room, Anjli sat beside her mother's bed, whispering reassurances in both Hindi and French. Watson stood quietly at the doorway, watching a girl who had given him more strength than all his millions ever could. Her mother survived the night, fragile but stable. And when she finally opened her eyes, she whispered, "Who is this man?" Watson stepped forward, bowing slightly, and replied, in careful Hindi he had learned just for this moment, "A man who owes your daughter his soul." Anjli's tears flowed freely. For years she had been invisible, her dreams dismissed. Now, standing beside her, was a man who saw her more clearly than anyone ever had. The story of the billionaire and the poor girl didn't end in Paris. It began there. For though they returned to their old worlds, they carried a new truth. That language can bridge class, that dreams can defy poverty, and that sometimes the person who understands you best is the one you least expect. And as Watson often reminded, in whispered French only she could hear, "Le vrai luxe, Anjli, ce n'est pas l'argent, c'est toi." The real luxury, Anjli, is not money, it's you. The end.